Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining me to talk about money and politics. Over the next 15 minutes, we'll explore a little bit about the status of election spending, both on the national side and in Virginia, and explore together what you can do to take action on this issue. First of all, my name is Nancy Morgan. I'm a member of the Virginia chapter of American Promise. What is American Promise? It's unique in the democracy reform space because it specifically focuses on getting money out of politics through a constitutional amendment that would allow Congress and the states to regulate yet again election spending. This is after 40 decades of Supreme Court rulings that have taken away that right. We're located in all 50 states. And we're focused on getting a constitutional amendment, not the 28th, because Virginia wants the ERA to be the 28th, but the 29th. And we would be remiss in Virginia 3 years ago when we set up if we didn't look at the issue of money and politics in our pay-to-play Commonwealth. Why? Well, basically because we, the people, not money, super PACs, or corporations, should govern according to the Constitution. So why should we care about money in politics? I think everybody who is out there listening has their priority issues. And I think that you'll all agree that there's some type of intersect between the influence of money and the public policies that govern these issues. For example, let's check the examples of Virginia energy policies and the role of Dominion. They've given $14 million over the last, since 1996. Climate change, broader issues. They're affected by money and politics. Certainly the issue of spiraling drug prices, dysfunctional healthcare system. Look at all the money that is lobbying put in to set up a dysfunctional private sector healthcare system. Mass incarceration, private prisons, even in Virginia, you can see money from GEO going into legislators' pockets. Nursing home care and regulations, the role of private sector in changing regulations that result in less care for nursing home residents. Broadband access, it's a huge issue under COVID that's come to the forefront in Virginia, certainly. The rural divide, and even in urban areas where basically the affordability of broadband is affected by local monopolies and their powers. My entry point is poverty programs. I'm a retired economist, having worked for the UN for 20 years. Then I started out my career in Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer, looking at poverty issues. And when my last post was in Tunisia, after Arab Spring, they did everything right in terms of good government, free and fair elections, organizing a transparent constitution. So I was disappointed to come back to the US to see that a lot of these issues that I care about are influenced in money, the corrosive impact in money. So let's just look at 2020. What a blowout in terms of money and politics. Look at that, $14 billion spent on election. That's a huge increase from the last 2016, which was a combined congressional and presidential rate. The Open Secrets, which is a great source for information about money and politics, estimates that more than 1 billion of this was dark money, meaning dark money that is not disclosed. It's usually these 501c4s where they have online ads and you don't know who's funding them. An additional 3 billion was from outside spending through super PACs and other entities that are not affiliated with a candidate but support elections. And if you look at the congressional races, just look at Georgia. These elections were like $500 million. Two Senate races in Georgia, obviously North Carolina, South Carolina, Ohio, Arizona. Huge money of going into these elections. So how did we get here? I think it's interesting to look at the role of Virginia. How did we contribute to this money and politics question? Now, who is this guy? Well, this is, if you were in Richmond in 1971, sitting in a cafe, you might have noticed Lewis Powell sitting with another Virginian who was the head of the Chamber of Commerce. And what was his message? It came out in the Powell memo, basically saying business must acquire political power. And why is he important? Well, because he was nominated to the Supreme Court by President Nixon 2 months later. So when you look, his involvement sort of started a 40-year court decisions that basically, as it shows in this cartoon, the Supreme Court message on free speech. Thanks again to the Supreme Court. My free speech is worth more than yours. So basically, these rulings have been taken away our political rights as citizens and have been giving them to big corporations and special interests in terms of our voice in our elections. And when you look at the history of these rulings, 1976, this was the Buckley versus Valeo. For the first time ever, election spending struck down as free speech violation. And interestingly enough, and I didn't know this is why Bloomberg and other individuals who are wealthy can finance their own elections. And this is the ruling that doesn't allow any limits on election spending. This was followed by 1977, the First National Bank versus Bellotti, unlimited corporate spending and ballot initiatives. We are not a ballot initiative states, but that is a big issue in a lot of states in terms of local and state elections. Of course, then here comes the 2010 infamous Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission, unlimited speech spending by corporations and unions deemed free speech. So that let loose the dogs of money and war in terms of this explosion in outside spending and the development of super PACs. And interestingly enough, from a Virginia's perspective, Citizens United was actually a Virginia company. So here we are again, contributing to the story. A 2011 important ruling, ATP versus Bullock. Bullock was the governor of Montana at the time, and it's extended Citizens United to strike down election laws of Montana. In fact, there were 25 states at the state level which had campaign finance laws that were struck down. Montana is the most egregious. They had a whole century of campaign finance laws that were struck down. 2014, McEachin versus the FEC, limits on total contributions to federal candidates struck down. So that is the history. And what happens? Why is money important? It's because this money going into our elections affects our public policies. And I think in that first slide, we could see that. And this is an interesting poll. It's basically asking a question to the wealthy versus the general public. And you can see there's a big dichotomy in how the perception of the public in terms of what type of public policies do they want. For example, governments must see that no one is without food, clothing, or shelter. You can see there's a 25% difference in the answer. Minimum wage, big issue now. Almost 80% feel that they need to be increasing the minimum wage. That's almost a 50% gap. The government should provide a decent standard of living. Again, a 25% gap. The government in Washington ought to see it that everybody who wants to work can find a job. That's a huge gap. Earned income tax credit should be increased rather than decreased from a poverty standpoint. This is the one that makes me the most upset because actually earned income tax credit is something that you're rewarding the working poor, and along with the child tax credit, has a huge impact in reducing poverty. And it's for working people. The federal government should provide jobs for anybody willing to work. Again, there's this huge 40% difference. So you can see the importance of this money coming in and influencing elections and indirectly public policies that don't favor the public good. So let's move on to our own pay-to-play state. Here's the Virginia elections. Well, look at that trend. You can see it's the same trend line. In 2019, which was both the Senate and the House, election spending exploded to $121 million. 20% of that came from out of the state. And we are one of only 5 states that has no campaign contributions. Soon to be number 4 because Oregon has a ballot initiative in last November, and they are putting in place limitations. So we are aligned with Utah, Nebraska, and Arkansas. So welcome to Virginia. And just to give you an example, the egregious example of the District 40 for the House of Delegates. There was $4 million between the two candidates, not their fault, just because it was a competitive race for a position that pays less than $18,000 a year. Now, there's something wrong with that story. I hope that you think that too. And it comes to no surprise that this translates into us being 46th on the SWAMP Index. The SWAMP Index is a survey that's done by the Coalition for Integrity. It's based on ethics rulings, including disclosure and monitoring for campaign finance. You can see that we are number 46, followed by Utah, Michigan, Oregon, Idaho, and Wyoming. So let's just spend a little bit of time looking at the graveyard of campaign finance bills. I always feel like a little bit like being in the movie Groundhog's Day, because every year seems to be the same, with in some cases with the same votes defeating these bills. So let's just review the bills that were introduced in the last General Assembly. Limits, we have no limits. Chap Peterson introduced it into the Senate and it died. Banning campaign donations from public service corporations like Dominion, Appalachian Power, Verizon, etc. Chap Peterson introduced it in the Senate. Ibrahim Samira introduced it in the House. They both died. And this is an interesting bill, banning corporate contributions. 22 states ban corporate contributions, and the federal government has banned corporate contributions since 1906, when Teddy Roosevelt actually said corporations have no right to be investing in our elections. This, we testified on all these bills, our group. This one, we testified, Dominion and Appalachian Power came in opposed. So we expected a vote. There was one Democrat who stood up and said, I make a motion to have a vote. There was no second. So basically, here's an example where democracy dies in darkness. And I think that it was particularly disrespectful, since you invite the public to come in and testify and not even have a vote. So it died in darkness. The fourth one is a fascinating story. We, along with Pennsylvania, are the only two states that have no restrictions on use of campaign contributions. I could run for office, just buy a ticket and fly to Paris, invest it in my LLC, pay off my mortgage, sure, why not? So here is a low-hanging fruit introduced, I think it was almost for the 6th, 7th, 8th year, banning these corporate personal use. It was introduced by Marcus Simon. It passed the House 100-0. How often does that happen? And then it moves to the Senate, where it goes to the Privileges Elections Committee, and it sort of stumbles out of that committee. And then it goes to the floor, where it was rewritten. And they talked about Pizzagate. Oh, we don't know. Can we, eat pizza that we buy with campaign finances? And so they basically had a voice vote, no official vote, there's no record of this, to send it back to a committee that was finished for the year. So again, dying in darkness. The only thing that came out this year was the David Bulovas, where he actually set up a study to commission to look at campaign finance. Well, just to remind everybody, Governor Wilder set up a commission in 1994 that actually looked at this issue, and they recommend campaign finance limitations. So 30 years later, we're doing another study. There was another study done by the McAuliffe, Governor McAuliffe, who they also addressed the issue of campaign finance in 2015. So here we are again with a study, which hopefully is not kicking the can down the road, and our group is hoping to provide input. And this is our eulogy, our group's eulogy for the campaign finance results in the General Assembly. Oh, the Grim Reapers of the Senate are sitting there. Oh, I'm so bored. I've got an idea. Why don't we go hang around the Senate and wait for some legislation to die? So that's our comment on campaign finance. Hopefully it will look different next year. So what is our group doing? We're doing legislative outreach. You can see that why is Beyer and Conley up here? Because there is we need a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United in order to regulate election spending. We cannot get around those Supreme Court rulings without a constitutional amendment. 21 states have already joined and asked for this. We're hoping that Virginia will officially come out and say we support this. Last session, all 7 of our Democratic representatives signed on this. So we're trying to get all of our representatives to sign on this, with the idea that if a constitutional amendment actually gets through Congress, that Virginia will be one of the first states to ratify it. Not the last like the ERA, but we will be ready to ratify. And we're also running, we do good money out pledges, including these are from the legislator trying to get everybody who's running for the House of Delegates, we want them to run on a good governance platform, not caring whether they're Democrat or Republican, because getting money out of politics is a nonpartisan issue. 75% of Americans want this to happen. And this includes Republicans, and 87% of businesses say that we've got a dysfunctional campaign system. We're providing input in the Bulva study, analysis on best practices, working with the Campaign Legal Center, the Coalition for Integrity, Voters' Right to Know, Common Cause. We're looking across the states to look at examples. We've had Zoom conversations with over 40 legislators asking about their concerns to identify mitigating those concerns through best practices from around the country. Building awareness, letters to the editor, engaging with journalists, partnerships, for example, talking to you here today, and building our group across the state, because we know from the ERA and redistricting, we need to have a broad coalition across our state in order to have this happen. So what can you do? You can entry points for action. Put your thoughts into a constituent letter. We have a letter. All you have to do is put your thoughts about money and politics. It translates into a letter that we can use to advocacy, whether it's to your senator, your congressman, your state representatives. You put in your address and zip code, and we'll send this off and use it for lobbying. Sign our citizens pledge saying you care about money and politics. And we're gonna use it in our lobbying day, our National Citizens Lobbying Leadership Conference, which is here. It's actually usually here, but it's virtual this year. It's free, so please sign up. Great speakers. We just need to have you sign up and join us and be part of our Virginia delegation. You can sign a petition asking senior officials in the Virginia General Assembly to support campaign finance reform. And for example, why not try to do a local resolution? In 2012, 2013, Alexandria Falls Church, Arlington County, all signed resolutions saying they want to get money out of politics. We need to have this groundswell of support to convince our legislators, especially those in the Senate, to pass campaign finance reform. So thanks for listening. We would love to have you join us. What do we want to do? Ratify a constitutional amendment by July 4th, 2026. We want Virginia to be the first state to ratify. And let's help us to pass campaign finance and ethics reform. You can see, my name is Nancy Morgan. Check out our website, Virginia Money Out of Politics. Please join us. We can only do this together with your help.